61. Zoey blacked out. She had no idea for how long. When she felt the truck slowing to a stop again, she pried her swollen eyes open and had the sense of having come full circle. She saw the wrought iron front gates of Arthur Livingston's estate, well, no, her estate, standing closed to all unwelcome visitors, the two stone dragon pillars standing vigilant on either side. She expected the candy hologram to appear and tell them the gates were locked, or for a crazy array of security devices to spring into action and cut them all to pieces. Instead, the gates simply slid open. But of course they did. Molech, after all, had someone on the inside. Instead of looping around the winding path through all the statues, decorations, and the Siberian tiger enclosure, Molech just pointed his hood toward the front doors and gunned it. The truck smashed through a pair of night statues, rumbled over bushes covered in Christmas lights, and ripped through the fence around the tiger enclosure, the sleepy beasts lazily watching them pass. They arrived in front of the massive bronze front doors, and Molech came around and ripped away the wires holding Zoey to the hood of the truck. She tumbled off onto the cobblestones, smashing her knees and elbows when she landed. A rough hand, Scott's, hooked under her armpit and yanked her up. She instinctively tried to pull away and walk on her own. She didn't want to be carried or dragged or yanked around by that frickin' arm again. She was sick of being cargo. Instead, she fell limp in his strong hands, making him practically drag her. The front doors started slowly creaking open on their own. Molech said to her, "By the way, are you curious to know who sold you out? To know who it was that you trusted and shared a roof with while they were tipping me off? Are you curious to know who told me Armando would be mincing along my rooftop that day?" He turned toward the open doorway and said, "Come on out here and say hi." A figure emerged from the shadows of the foyer and strode confidently into view, standing defiantly in the afternoon sun. The man said, "It's always the last one you suspect, isn't it, Zoey? Always the one you underestimate. I took abuse from your father for far too long, and now, today, I finally have my revenge." Zoey peered at her traitor through her swollen eyes. That dark complexion, the curly hair, the goatee, the toothpick jutting from the corner of his mouth. Zoey said, "Who the hell are you?" "You know who I am." I literally don't. I have never seen you before in my life." "You saw me every day!" The man spat the words in a rage. "In the yard, trimming the bushes, fixing the decorations in the courtyard. I was fixing lights in that tree 2 days ago. You walked right past me." "You're, what, one of the landscaping guys?" "I'm Gary O'Brien, the gardener. I worked for your father for 25 years. We played golf together. I slept in one of the guest rooms." "Oh, I knew what you were saying. We don't need to worry about Gary. Gary is too dumb to think up schemes like this." "Well, now, you're looking at Gary in a whole new light, aren't you?" "I'm sorry. I just don't remember you." "I want to hear you say it. I want to hear you say you underestimated me." Molech said, "Calm down, yard master. So, she says Blackwater's inside. Is that true?" "Yeah. Go up the stairs. There's a sitting room to the left. They're just sitting in there, waiting. No ambush, no nothing. They didn't even notice the ground security was off. All because in their wildest dreams, they never could have guessed that little old Gary could—" "And that's all you know? You've got no other information for me?" "No, man, but they're right up there. Go have at them." "Good. Looks like we're done here." And with that, Molech stepped forward and punched the man. There was a wet sound, like a bucket of paint splashed against a wall. And in a blink, everything on Gary from the knees up had vaporized. Fragments of pink and white and yellow flew across the open bronze doors, spraying across the marble tile of the foyer inside. A red mist hung in the air, and then was gone. Zoey screamed, or tried to. It was just kind of a gurgle at this point. Molech hooted in celebration, a sound he'd make rooting for a contestant in a wet t-shirt contest. He said, "God, I'll never get bored with that." They stepped inside, and Molech glanced around at the foyer. "This is a nice place. I might set up shop here after all is said and done. Let's go." They stepped around the spray of gore that had been Gary the gardener, went past the massive looming Christmas tree, and headed up the grand staircase. Molech in the lead, Scott having to drag Zoey up the stairs like a bag of trash. Doc and the other henchmen had stayed behind, maybe to make sure nobody stole their trucks. Molech clearly was not worried about being outnumbered. Below them, Zoe saw Carlton enter the foyer with a mop. They reached the buffalo room, and Molech gestured to Zoe to open the door, presumably to take the brunt of any booby traps that lay in wait. Scott tossed her in that direction, and she tumbled to the floor. She reached up and opened the door from her knees. There was a fire going. Soft classical music played. On the wall feed, an army could be seen swarming around the sideways Parkview building. In one of two large leather armchairs on the opposite side of the room sat Will Blackwater, looking calm to the point of boredom, swirling the scotch in his glass, as if he had been watching the whole event play out, and found it uninteresting. Sitting in the chair next to him was Arthur Livingston. 62. Arthur smiled at Molech and said, "Dun, dun, dun." There was a long silence. Then Molech said, "Bullshit." Arthur turned to Will and said, "He's 9 minutes later than you'd said he'd be. You owe me $50. Will shrugged. Traffic was worse than I anticipated. A lot of people trying to flee the city due to our little bomb threat. Have to admit, I expected more from the populace. This is tabula rasa. Since when do we run? Molech said, "Oh, I killed you. No, I not only killed you, but your body was vaporized." Arthur said, "You did massive damage to my rib cage, lungs, diaphragm, and various gut parts I never heard of. Required 15 hours of surgery and 2,000 stitches to repair it all. So no, I won't be jumping up from this chair and doing a jig for you. My whole torso looks like Frankenstein. But I'm a tough old bastard, and I was able to crawl to the sub-basement before the warehouse blew, as was the plan." Molech paused, feeling the ground shifting beneath his feet. Zoe thought he was trying to work out the logistics of what Arthur was saying, and coming up blank. When he finally got his mouth working again, all he could do was repeat, "Bullshit." Will said, "Why don't you have a drink? We'll talk through this like adults. That's all we wanted. I mean, look at us. We had to hold a whole city hostage just to get you back to the negotiating table." Molech turned to Black Scott, as if looking for someone to agree that none of this could possibly be real. Scott said, "Man, don't look at me. I'm totally lost here." Will said, "Before we begin, let's establish some parameters, just so everyone is on the same page. This estate is well within the blast radius of the plasma nuke Andre is currently threatening the city with. If I die, it goes off. You won't hear anything. You won't see anything. You just won't be anymore." Molech said, "No, you're not that crazy." Arthur said, "You didn't leave us a choice. This patch of land was dirt and scrub brush when I staked my claim. And quite frankly, I think of it as my city still. You don't get to have it. I'll turn it all back into desert before I'll allow that. The rest of the world, I don't care. But tabula rasa is off the table. The negotiation begins there. Now, are you familiar with the Lord of the Rings?" Molech hesitated again, realizing he was playing someone else's game, but with no idea what else to do. He said, "Yeah, old horror movie about a ghost girl who crawls out of a television?" "No. This is the one with wizards and elves. Ends with the midgets fighting on a volcano? It's not important. What matters is that the rings in the title are magic rings that grant the owner total power. Kinda like Raiden, wouldn't you say? Now, in the story, the rings come from a wizard named Sauron. He makes these rings and hands them out to the rulers of the land, knowing that the greed of the people would overcome their common sense, which, if they'd listened, would have told them this was clearly too good to be true. So I guess he'd be like me, and seen, perfecting Raiden to sell to the highest bidder. But see, here's the twist. It turns out that Sauron was playing a trick. The rings were not all powerful. There was one ring he kept for himself, unimaginatively called the One Ring, that ruled all the others. The rulers should have seen this coming, should have known a sly character like Sauron wouldn't just give away such a prize. But, in the lust for power, these rulers had made themselves slaves, just like you did." Molech narrowed his eyes. This clearly sounded like a lie, but the events the last 2 minutes had rendered anything possible. Will said, "We have a device. A switch that can remotely overload Raiden. You, Molech, are a walking bomb, and we hold the detonator." "Bullshit." "Think it through," said Arthur. "Why would I have left this to chance? The moment we had a working device, I had the engineering team build in the Sauron safeguard in secret." Will set a simple black box on the coffee table in between the chairs. On it was a single, oversized red button. Arthur said, "It was destroyed in the warehouse, so we needed a little time to build a new one. Had to actually install a whole new factory just to build it, in fact. but it's very simple in how it works. If I push this button, you die, along with every man in the vicinity with Raiden in his bones. But I don't want that, and not just because I don't want burning chunks of you two all over my salon. I have a daughter now, as it turns out, and my goal is for her to not have to inherit some mindless cycle of retaliation. No, I prefer to make you a deal. All I need you to do is leave town. Tabula Rasa is mine. It's my baby. Take your whole Molech act and go do your demonstration in India or China or the moon. I don't care. You go make your billions and leave me and mine alone. But you don't ever set foot in this city again, or else I punch the off button on your life, and that's that. You had your fun. You can tell the city whatever you like to save face. But then you leave us alone. That's all you have to do. The rest of the world is yours. Molech said nothing. Zoey couldn't tell if he was considering the offer or not. These next few moments were everything. Zoey studied his face from where she sat on the floor, trying to keep her mind off her battered body, that jab of the knife in her ribs with every breath, sick with the blood she had swallowed. To Molech, Will said, "There's nothing to consider. In this deal, all you leave here with is everything." There was a meow, and Zoey turned to see Stench Machine, trotting in to greet his owner and ask why she left the house without permission. She reached out to stroke him, and then he froze, staring down the men in the armchairs at the opposite end of the room, as if seeing his old nemesis. Rage and terror filled Stench Machine's eyes, the sight of an old foe who had tormented him time and time again, haunting his dreams. Then came the steely resolve of an animal who has decided that enough is enough, that he's going to make a stand. With a meow that Zoey had no doubt meant this ends now, Stench Machine darted across the floor. Zoey screamed at the cat. He didn't respond to her command because he is a cat. Stench Machine cleared the distance in 2 seconds. There was a moment when Will saw what was happening and began to make a move to stop it, but was too late. Stench Machine flung his body at Arthur Livingston, who did not react. The cat flew right through his torso, through the hologram. He bounced off the back of the empty leather chair and flopped haphazardly to the floor. Molech's eyes grew wide. "Yes! Oh, I knew it!" Will tried to recover. "Now, this changes nothing. Molech, the kill switch is..." Molech flew across the room. He yanked Will up by his throat, kicked the chair out of the way, and slammed Will into the wall, the wood splintering with the impact. Zoey looked at the kill switch. She wasn't actually sure how much strength she had in her legs. She had been dogging it with Scott, making him drag her, but she also hadn't actually tested her limbs. And this here was a one-shot thing. She coiled and sprung and threw herself across the room toward the kill switch button. She could hear Scott lunging after her. She had a moment to imagine his look of surprise at how spry his captive was, but then she fell well short of the button and banged her chin off the floor. She frantically reached up again and swatted at the button, and this time she got it. Molech and Scott didn't explode. The button wasn't actually a kill switch, of course. Having one of those in the Caterpillar would have actually saved everybody a ton of trouble, but it wasn't an empty box either. There was a blast and a flash that Zoey felt in her gut, impossibly loud and impossibly bright. All of her senses stopped working. Her vision scrambled. Her ears were filled with a mind-rending whistle. It was some kind of riot control device, Will had said, and it really did take the fight out of a person. Still, the fact that she had been somewhat prepared for it allowed her to recover before anyone else in the room, about 2 seconds before, it turned out. She scrambled to her feet, her razor blade broken rib digging into her side as a reward, and grabbed Will's collar. Together, they stumbled across the room toward the fireplace, hearing yells and footsteps from Molech and Scott behind them. Zoey snatched up Stench Machine by the scruff of the neck, and together, they dove into the fire. 63. The flames in the fireplace were not real, but hid a waist-high door that served as an escape route from the room. The house, Will had shown her, was full of them, all of them ultimately leading down to the garage. Arthur's race car bed had a button, for instance, that would dump you into a chute and take you straight down. Arthur had punched it in his sleep one night and wound up trapped down in the garage naked until Carlton came to rescue him. Arthur never wanted to be more than 30 seconds from a getaway vehicle. Zoey skidded onto the tiled floor of a narrow hallway. Wu was standing over her. The second everyone's feet cleared the fireplace, Wu punched a button on the wall, and a metal door slammed down over the hatch. He rushed forward, picked Zoey up, and got a glimpse of her busted-up face. "Goodness, are you all right?" Will, who had blood running out of his mouth and was likely nursing several grave internal injuries, climbed to his feet and growled, "Move!" They stumbled/ran down the hall, which appeared to be a dead end. Will tapped a spot on the wall and a door appeared, revealing a stairwell. They stepped through, and the section of wall closed behind them once again. As they ran down 2 flights of stairs, they heard the sound of a mechanically enhanced Molech punching through the wall of the buffalo room above. Zoey asked, "Where are we going?" Wu said, "Down. This is Plan Z. We're getting you to a car. A manual drive one. I will do the steering myself." Zoey said, "Oh, come on. We'll never make it. One of Molech's cyborgs is going to tear the car in half before we get off the grounds." Wu said, "I am an accomplished driver, Miss Ash." There was another crash overhead, Molech smashing through walls, trying to figure out in which direction his captives had run. Will said, "Different plan. Wu, you're going to get out one of the cars and take off out of here like a stabbed rat. You won't have Zoey with you, but you will absolutely make Molech's thugs think you do. Pick a car with tinted windows. Make your escape noisy so that you get their attention." Zoey groaned. "Oh, God. We're creating a diversion. This is my life now." Wu looked skeptical. To Zoey, he said, "I work for you, not him. Are these your instructions?" She nodded. "Drawing them away will get you a lot further toward protecting me than if you stay here and smack them with your sword for 5 seconds before they vaporize you." "I appreciate your frankness in regards to my abilities. Will, I'm leaving it to you to get her to safety. Do you want me to take the cat?" Zoey thought, then said, "No, he would just worry about me." Wu hurried off. Something crashed overhead, another brick wall being punched into dust. Will led Zoey toward a row of 3 doors at the end of the room. The one in the middle was the elevator that brought them down from the library the other day. The other 2 were stairwells leading down from other parts of the house, the convergence of numerous escape routes. "Damn it, Will. Why in the hell did you think the Arthur hologram would work?" "There was no reason it wouldn't. How many conversations have you had in your life where you felt the need to go touch the other person to make sure they were solid? We just didn't anticipate the cat. The lie about the kill switch was plausible enough." Even before he finished saying those last few words, a light went off in Zoey's brain. She felt so stupid, like when she found her car keys in her pocket after spending half an hour tearing her room apart looking for them. In the terror of having been snatched out of her home by her own car, she had forgotten what she already knew. She said, "Wait, stop. Can we get to Santa's workshop from here? The ballroom." "Why?" "It's not a lie. Our stupid made-up story is true. We need to get to the caterpillar." 64. Will led her up to the stairwell on the far right, up a flight of stairs, down a narrow windowless hallway, both grunting as each step aggravated at least one source of internal bleeding. Finally, Will pushed open a wooden door to reveal shelves full of foodstuffs. They were inside the pantry of the kitchen, still 1 floor below where Molech's goons were conducting the world's most destructive search for their missing hostages. Will hurried out, trying to help haul Zoey along, her body feeling like she had been cut open and stuffed with broken glass. Will ran over to the room's one large window. "We'll cut across the courtyard. Stand back." He grabbed a bar stool and smashed the glass, then jumped up onto the sill. The man was actually as agile as a cat when properly motivated. On the other hand, it took a lot of help to haul the crippled Zoey up and over, with Will's hand clamped over her mouth to suppress her screams when shards from her splintered rib started grinding into her lung. They emerged into the cold of the snow-covered courtyard, and Zoey had to stop and cry for 5 seconds before she could move again. She sneezed, and flecks of blood flew across her shoes. But soon, she was lumbering along like a zombie, the 2 of them making laughably slow progress across the diagonal path toward the ballroom. Zoey could see where the shrubs over there had been flattened by the flatbed truck the other night. She fought to suck in each harsh, wheezing breath. There was a blast behind them, and a row of windows exploded on the 2nd floor. Zoey said, "Who the hell is Gary? Or was Gary? And why the hell didn't you know about it?" You ever run into a new coworker, ask them their name, only to have them tell you they've worked there for 5 years? That was Gary, a man so dull and forgettable that he never appeared on your radar. It's like that was his superpower, a stealth human being. We never stood a chance. They entered Santa's workshop, and Zoey shuffled over to the console on the caterpillar. "Here, take stench machine." She shoved the cat into Will's chest, who immediately set him on the floor. If he got cat hair on his suit, he would probably shrivel up and die like a salted snail. Zoey started swiping through the menus. "How do you work it? How do you tell it to make the thing on the list?" "Which thing?" "Arthur did create the One Ring. It's on here. I saw it earlier." "Zoey, nobody even knows what these—" "No, listen. He left it to me. Arthur left me the One Ring. That's why he left me the coin. Look." She scrolled down until she found the very last entry in the list, the one marked with her name. "See? It's literally the only thing on here in plain English, because he assumed we wouldn't be so dense as to not browse the whole list right away. Will looked at the listing and scrunched his face ever so slightly, his mind working. Zoey said, "Come on, how do you make it go?" "You tap that symbol, the one that looks like an owl that's on fire." "But, Zoey, we don't even know." She poked the owl. A row of numbers popped up and started counting down. She asked, "What does that mean?" "It's the production time. It's going to take 15 minutes. She groaned and kicked the machine. "We don't have 15 minutes. The house wasn't that big, but they just left an obvious trail behind them consisting of a broken window and a clear line of snowy footprints. But Will was already on his phone, swiping through what looked like security camera feeds from around the grounds. He found one with a view of the rear of the house. They watched together as a low, flat black sports car went roaring down the drive, having emerged from the garage door Zoey had smashed a few hours ago. Will said, "The son of a bitch took the Bugatti." "Well, you told him to make it noisy." A moment later, two of the Molich crew monster trucks went rumbling after Wu. They kept watching, but the other truck never joined the chase. Zoey cursed. "All right," said Will. "This is why your plan has layers. We still have a big card to play with Molich, and that's Andre's bomb threat. All we have to do is—" He was interrupted by a call. Echo's hologram face popped into view and immediately said, "Will, everything is about to go to hell here." 65. Zoey said, "Oh, really? Because we got everything under control on this end, we're breaking for lunch." "They're breaching the building, tuned to the lob feed." Will brought it up. The League of Badass team was piled in their van, barreling toward the sideways Parkview apartments where Andre was holed up. It appeared they were looking to redeem themselves for abandoning their post at Squatterville by recklessly charging toward a man with a weapon of mass destruction that could destroy the entire city, Squatterville included. Hey, they weren't called the League of Geniuses. Will said, "Well, it's too late to go back in time and stop their mothers from drinking, so can you move the bomb?" "Not before they get here, no." "All right, get out of there." Andre's voice piped up, shouting from somewhere in the room with Echo, "You need us to try to hold them off." "Do what you can, but don't get yourself killed." They watched as the lob crew spilled out of their van, hustled through a low sideways window, and started rappelling up a vertical hallway, their crossbows and swords strapped to their backs. Lee was in the lead, and soon pulled himself up through a sideways door. He found a steep drop in front of him. When horizontal, this was to be a large conference room for parties and conventions. Turn it on its side, and it became a sheer drop of about 30 feet straight down, to the wall that was now serving as a narrow floor. Standing down there, next to his nuclear bomb, was Andre. Prowling around his feet were lots and lots of cats. The view from Lee's camera lurched over the opening as he awkwardly tried to climb into the room without tumbling down and breaking his neck. He tried to bring his crossbow to bear on Andre, which, difficult to do while trying to simultaneously straddle the edge of the sideways door frame. He said, "Disarm the bomb! Do it now or we'll turn you into a cactus!" Zoey thought the man would regret not having a better line ready once he found out that more than 500 million people had heard him say it. Down on the wall/floor, Andre put his hands on his hips. "You fools! This device is armed with a tremor-sensitive timer. If any one of you even gently touch the floor, you and the entire city will be vaporized instantly." Lee raised the crossbow and said, "Disarm it, now!" Andre laughed his supervillain laugh and said, "The world is watching you, Mohawk. Let us test what you are willing to do to stop me." Andre pushed a button on his belt. With a howl, a cat flew up from the floor and stuck to Andre's thigh, its metal collar clinking as it contacted his armor. Then another cat twisted across the room and clanked to his chest. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, Andre was covered from the neck down with writhing, meowing felines. "Ha ha ha!" bellowed Andre. "Go ahead. Skewer an adorable kitten while your fans look on. Now you know why they call me the puss." Suddenly, the view was plummeting down toward the wall. Lee had jumped, or more likely fell. He crashed to the floor, cracking the plaster under his boots. Then the view from the camera spun as the man rolled and trained his crossbow on Andre. "Stop! And drop the cats!" But Andre was already on the move, ducking through a sideways door behind him. Lee pursued, carefully giving the nuke a wide berth. The view spun back around to the entrance where Vixen was rappelling down the vertical wall after him. Lee ran through the sideways door and found Andre had disappeared through a door-sized hole that had been sawed into the ceiling tile, allowing him to pass to the next vertical floor of the building. Lee ducked through and found Andre running along a hallway, leaping over doorways. Lee aimed his crossbow, trying to get a clear shot. Impossible without horribly skewering an adorable kitten in the process, utterly ruining the hero moment he would want to be played over again and again for the next century. Nobody would want to replay the video of a cat getting kebabbed onto a fleeing terrorist. So, Lee watched helplessly as Andre bounced down the shadowy hallway, the occasional cat jiggling free and flopping to the floor as he went. Will shook his head and said, "Was that part your idea or Andre's?" "I don't even know. We were so sleep-deprived at that point." Lee doubled back and joined his team, who had gathered around the bomb. They discussed it and decided they would try to get in contact with a bomb defusal expert and hopefully get kick-ass video of them cutting the red wire at the last moment and thus saving the city. But as they were examining the nuke to try to find the trigger mechanism Andre had threatened them about, Lee got a quizzical look on his face. He reached out, gave the bomb a gentle push, and watched it topple over. It wasn't difficult, since the whole thing was a hollow shell made out of plastic. Will sighed. At that moment, a news alert popped up over the feed. Hovering above the screen was a scrolling headline. Livingston daughter believed dead. Will brought up a video of an enormous fireball, at the bottom of which was the tiniest hint of a blackened and twisted automobile. Zoey gasped, "Oh my god, was he in there?" Will found video of the car chase that had preceded the disaster. A black Bugatti Chiron roaring through an industrial park, chased by a monster truck, both followed by a cloud of camera drones buzzing overhead, as if they had disturbed a giant beehive and were now being pursued by the swarm. The car left the road and smashed through a chain-link fence, slicing across a field and leaving a stream of dust like a contrail. The car streaked like a guided missile directly into a row of white spherical tanks that, apparently, were filled to the top with some kind of amazingly combustible gas. The gargantuan orange and black plume rose so far into the air that it consumed half of the drones. The monster truck, unfortunately, had stayed out of the blast radius. Zoey said, "He did it on purpose. He drove right into that thing. Did he sacrifice himself? For me? Was that like a kamikaze thing?" Will said, "Well, he was a man from California raised by Chinese-American parents, so the kamikaze would surely be a treasured part of their heritage. You should hide. The henchmen are going to be calling in to report what happened, and if I can convince Molich that you went up with the car, then all you have to do is stay out of sight, so you at least can make it through this." She shook her head. "I'm in no condition to run. I can't breathe. I think my lung is punctured. I'd get 2 steps outside that door, and then it would pop and go whizzing around the courtyard like a balloon. No, the One Ring is real, and the caterpillar's going to spit it out. We just have to make it until then." "We don't know that. And this is coming from someone who knew Arthur better than you. It doesn't say kill switch or One Ring or master key or anything else. It just says Zoey. It could be a little Zoey Ash action figure for all you know. It could be a plaque telling you how much he loves you. And if we go this way, we don't have a backup plan." "No. If you want to go, go. But I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not running from men like him. Win or lose, I'm not doing that." They watched the countdown on the caterpillar, a progress bar shrinking so slowly that Zoey was starting to think it was getting longer. Zoey asked, "Did you know?" "Know what?" "Did you know I was going to wind up at Molich's headquarters? Did you know Gary was a traitor, and that he was going to rig the car and all that? Was that all part of your plan?" "No." "If it was, I want to know. No more lies. I know that's what you do, and that's what you're good at, but this one time, I want to know." "No, I wouldn't do that." "Because it would put everything at risk, right? I could have broke down and told him everything." "No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to you." The door to the courtyard exploded off its hinges. 66. It was Black Scott who had found them first. He strode into the room, glanced at Will and Zoey, then looked over the random collection of objects the machine had spat out. He absently picked up a narrow hunk of pipe to examine it. Will walked to a nearby table and poured himself a drink. "You want one?" Scott said, "Man, you got a drinking problem. You people know you got a living, severed head out in your courtyard? Thing is out there chewing on the snow. Gonna give me nightmares." Zoey said, "It's been a weird week." Into some unseen communicator, Scott said, "They're here. Ballroom." Then he looked at Will and shook his head. "A fake bomb? What, did you make it out of paper mache? You know, you guys seem to have spent a long time on this plan, and I gotta say, I got no clue whatsoever what it was trying to accomplish." Will shrugged. It looked better on paper. Will made a show of looking at his watch. "Speaking of which, we should go stand somewhere else. sooner rather than later, like, say, in the next 6 minutes. Scott said, since you're just waiting for me to ask you what happens in 6 minutes, so... A very big boom. The nuke was fake, of course. The Fabricator doesn't have the ability to create a city-destroying device. But the blast that vaporized Arthur's warehouse, we can both agree that was real? Scott said, mm-hmm. That's because the Fabricator does have, in its memory, the ability to fabricate a self-destruct device, one big enough to turn a city block into a crater. After Molich broke into his warehouse, Arthur set his machine to make just such a device. Well, about 10 minutes ago, we set this machine to do the same. Zoey studied Scott's face. It was interesting to watch all the various stages of emotion wash over it. On one hand, the guy knew for a fact that Will Blackwater was a world-class liar and con man. He had no doubt been told by his own boss to automatically dismiss anything Will said as a falsehood or some other attempt at manipulation, no matter what it was. So the first expression was mild amusement, the way you react to the clumsy lie of a child. But here's the thing. Lying would have become useless thousands of years ago if countering it was as simple as dismissing the liars completely. The really good liars were like chemists, brewing formulas that were mostly true, the toxins undetectable in the mixture. So in just 3 seconds, Zoey watched Scott's face transition from amusement to concern as he started to weigh the possibility that Will was in fact telling the truth. After all, it was perfectly possible, and even logical, to do what he was claiming to have done. It would prevent the mansion from falling into Molich's hands, along with whatever valuables or secrets were stored within, and would force Scott to make a call about what to do with his hostages. It was totally the kind of thing Will Blackwater would do. To help drive it home, Will said, I'm not going to let Molich move in and sleep in Arthur's bed. 5 minutes from now, this is going to be a crater, no matter what we do. So let's not be stupid. Let's get out of the blast radius and plug our ears. I liked Arthur a lot, but I have no intention of dying the same way he did. But I will, if you insist. As you say yourself, the alternative is months of slow torture at the hands of your rot-brain employer. An instant death that I don't even feel? That's pretty much my best-case scenario at this point. So which of us has something to lose? Scott shook his head, grinning. I mean this with all honesty. People say Molich is bad. But you, Blackwater, you're 10 times worse. We may burn in hell, but the devil gonna greet you like an old friend. Will sipped his drink. You're a smart man, Scott, and I respect you. You could have probably worked for us under other circumstances. So I say, forget Molich. Let's you and I work out an agreement to... Scott swung the pipe and smashed it into Will Blackwater's skull. Blood sprayed across the nearby marshmallow snowman, and Will Blackwater collapsed to the floor with a sickening thud. He did not move. Zoey screamed. 67. She ran toward the caterpillar, or as much of a run as she could manage, anyway. Scott grabbed her by the back of her shirt, yanked her, and threw her back across the room. She crashed into a peppermint elf, her shattered ribs sending jets of fire across her torso. She coughed up blood. Scott said, Why don't you just sit tight for a sec? We're going to wait for Molich to get here, right about... Scott held a finger in the air. Now. The wall behind them exploded. Chunks of plaster rained down on Scott and Zoey, and a cold wind rushed in from the courtyard. Molich strode through the dust cloud, brushing bits of plaster off his superhero costume. At least 5 henchmen had followed him. All of them looked greatly amused. Molich glanced down at where Will was sprawled, then looked at Scott. What, you started without me? What can I say? Juice don't wait. That it does not. Molich loomed over Zoey. She tried to back away, scooting backward on her butt, nowhere to go. Molich watched with annoyed disdain. Tell me, Piglet, what story were you telling yourself up to now? What world did you think you were living in? Don't you get what I've been preparing my whole life for this? What have you been preparing for? Don't bother. I actually know the answer to that question, and you don't. See, a gazelle goes out and eats grass because it thinks it's feeding itself, but it's not. It's feeding the lion. It's fattening itself up to be food. It doesn't know it, but it was born to be prey. That is its only purpose. So what purpose do you think a dumb trailer turd with no self-esteem and big tits serves in a world of true men? Maybe I'll let one of my boys show you. Maybe I'll let all of them show you. Zoey said, It's like you have rape threat Tourette syndrome. My favorite part? It's that exact moment when the defiance turns into terror. About 15 seconds from now, I'd say. Zoey reared back and kicked him as hard as she could in the groin, but it appeared the codpiece wasn't just decorative. Molech didn't even flinch. "Well," he said, "just for that." Molech raised up a boot, brought it down, and effortlessly snapped Zoey's right leg below the knee. Both bones splintered, jutting out of the skin. Zoey was unable to scream. She had torn up her vocal cords too much. She could only lay there and squeeze her eyes and try to block out the pain, to block out everything. On the other side of the room, the caterpillar clunked and hissed and wound down. A beep announced its production of Object Zoey was finished. A little late for that, she thought. Zoey forced herself to look down and, for the first time, saw part of the inside of her own body, white bone jutting out around ragged muscle and fat from her lower leg, blood soaking through her ripped jeans. She felt herself about to pass out when she heard a soft meow. Stench Machine had arrived, having tracked down his wounded owner a second time, there to offer whatever assistance he could. It didn't amount to much. Zoey hugged him and Molech said, "T-Bone, kill that goddamned cat!" Zoe's scream of protest was barely a sound, but she couldn't stop it. The henchman known as T-Bone reached for Stench Machine, but the cat slipped out of his grasp, streaking away through the ragged hole in the wall Molech had punched open. T-Bone giggled as he watched him go, but Molech said, "No, go get it. I want you to pull it apart in front of her." Zoey said, "Please, don't. Just, please. Go get the cat." T-Bone obeyed, chuckling as he ran into the courtyard. To Scott, Molech said, "You got the camera? Good. Frame me up. This is about to become the Zoey show." Scott brought up the camera, and they arranged the scene to get Molech in the foreground, with the shattered Zoey in the background. They had to pause to move a table out of the way. Then, Molech insisted on getting the feed to play on the wall so he could check in on it from time to time to see how it all looked. Finally, they got it arranged to Molech's satisfaction, and he said into the camera, "All right, everybody, we got a little off track with our show, but all's good now. I'm glad this happened. Really, I prefer things to be a bit more intimate, if you know what I mean." T-Bone reappeared at the ragged hole in the wall and said, "Man, there's a bunch of trees and stuff out there. That cat is gone." There was a roar and a white blur, and suddenly everyone was shouting. T-Bone was on his back, with a white Siberian tiger on top of him, ripping his throat out. Amidst the chaos, Zoey rolled over and tried to move. Black spots danced in front of her eyes. The pain had blown out the circuits in her brain. She couldn't even tell if she was feeling it anymore. She dragged herself on her elbows toward the caterpillar. One of her splintered leg bones got caught against a chair leg, and she passed out. She had no idea how long she was out, maybe a few seconds. When she woke up again, it was to the sound of screams, tiger roars, and heavy, meaty punches. She dragged herself again, toward the caterpillar, toward the chute at the end. Nothing on her body worked other than her arms. Everything was either numbness or blinding pain. She pulled herself along the black and white checkerboard tile, so slowly. The second time in this ordeal, she had felt like she was living one of those nightmares where you run and never reach the end of the hall, some horror lurking behind you. Zoey reached the chute, stopped to breathe, and had tried to focus her eyes. Behind her, she heard horrific sounds of a man killing a wild animal. She glanced back and saw Molech stand and laugh, blood on his metal fists. She didn't have much time. She had no time. They would notice her. They would be on her in 1 second. Zoey pushed herself up on her hands, unable to stand. She pulled herself up so she could reach into the caterpillar's delivery basket. She reached in, blindly, and grabbed the object the catalog of schematics knew only as Zoey. It was a football helmet. Zoey thought, "That bastard," and blacked out. 68. She forced her eyes open. Once more, she had no idea how much time had passed. She looked over and found Will Blackwater on the floor, limbs askew, his head oozing blood. Not far away, the white tiger lay dead, along with 2 shirtless men. Molech's numbers were only increasing, though. 10 or so henchmen had joined the party. Not that Molech needed their help. Zoey sat up, her back to the caterpillar, the stupid football helmet in her lap. It didn't even look like a real regulation helmet. It was like a toy one, for a kid. She wanted to cry, but didn't have it in her. Molech noticed the movement and strode up to her, clenching his bloody robot fists. Scott was tracking him with the camera. "I want to thank you and your tiger-owning father for giving me the most amazing piece of highlight video I'll ever make. I'm probably the first human in 10,000 years to punch a tiger to death. Now, I hope you'll forgive the delay. While you were out, I let my fans vote for what I do to you. Want to guess what the overwhelming majority voted for? Because it's winning by a 10-1 margin over the next choice. A couple of the henchmen laughed. Zoey looked down at her ruined leg, transfixed by the sight of the leg bone's exposed, gooey pink center. Her vision was pulsing red, blooming with each heartbeat. Scott said, Skyline feed is back too. We're now live everywhere. All the feeds consolidating right here, right now. Audience is sitting at 1 billion with a B. Zoey tried to think, but the thoughts were shadowy figures barely glimpsed in a thick fog of pain. She could think of nothing else but the original plan, the one that so far hadn't exactly been a raging success. She swallowed a pint of blood and said, We have a kill switch. Piglet, if that existed, you'd have punched it already. Now, I have a strangely specific request from my fans here. I'm gonna need you to roll over. Wait. Zoey jammed the stupid football helmet on her head. It was still warm from the machine. This, helmet. It's the magic protection helmet. You can't hurt anybody wearing this. Molech held out his metal hands. Come on. This is just sad. He reached down, grabbing her blood-soaked shirt as if to tear it off. No! Stop! Stop! Zoey squeezed her eyes shut and waited. And waited. For a moment that never came. After 10 seconds, she pulled her swollen eyes open again, and Molech was standing there, completely frozen. Every part of his body, save for his face, which was contorting itself in rage and confusion, fists still clutching her shirt. Scott, sensing his boss was in distress, rushed over. Zoey turned toward him and again said, Stop! And he also stopped. She backed up on her elbows, pulling her shirt free of Molech's frozen fingers. Oh, wow. Oh my God. It works. The helmet. Oh my God, our stupid lie was true. It really was. Okay, it's voice operated. Everybody freeze. The dozen henchmen froze, almost comically. One guy was frozen in mid-run, like a living sports poster a kid would have on his bedroom wall, and immediately toppled over. One guy's hand was frozen on his crotch, like he'd been in the middle of scratching himself. Their mouths still worked, as Crotch Guy squinted and said, Am I the only one who's paralyzed right now? Is there a reboot or something I need to do here? Zoey said, Okay, everyone start spanking yourselves. There was no response to this command, as that one apparently hadn't been programmed into the system. Zoey was deeply disappointed in Arthur, but realized she needed to keep her eyes on the bigger picture. Molech said to her, Just deactivate the implants. Just turn them off completely. I'll take on everyone you've got with my own body, my own brain. Come on. Me against whoever you can summon with your daddy's money. Take away the gadgets. I'll show you who the better man is. Instead, Zoey said, Scott, throw the camera. He didn't. Another command that his body apparently didn't understand. Throw your left arm forward and open your hand. That worked. He chucked the camera past Zoey, where it crashed against the caterpillar. Up on the wall feed, the view scrambled and went to black. Blink immediately switched to the second most popular feed. Incredibly, it was inside the League of Badass van, which was, at this moment, rumbling toward the courtyard. These idiots just did not give up. The van slid to a stop near the gazebo, the group bumbling out of the sliding side door with their medieval weapons in hand. Zoey saw for the first time that they were chasing two figures, Andre, still in his stupid costume, and Echo. They had led them back to the estate, either accidentally or on purpose, and had ditched their escape motorcycle outside the fence. Andre, Zoey noted, still had a single cat stuck to his back. To Molech, Zoey said, What would you do, if you were me, right now? Command your robot hands to rip out your own throat? Pull your head off? Maybe do it slow? Have you pull your own guts out of your belly? Spread the video of it far and wide so everybody knows not to mess with me? Molech said nothing. His muscles were flexing, veins popping, trying to move the frozen machinery in his joints. At best, he could just wiggle his shoulders slightly. Zoey continued, And then some cohort of yours, some roided-up lizard brain who's sitting on a sofa right now cleaning his guns, he sees that video and he comes to get payback. And then the whole thing starts all over, forever and ever. blood on top of blood, until somebody finally takes a breath and decides to just let it go. There was a ruckus behind Molech as Andre stumbled through the hole in the wall, eyes wide, trying to make sense of this bizarre, frozen standoff taking place between Zoey and the array of shirtless men menacing her. Echo popped through immediately after, but there was no moment of confusion on her part. She saw the injured Zoey and flew toward her, actually skidding the last few steps, sliding on the tile floor and gracefully ending up in a kneeling position next to Zoey, the bitch trying to upstage her. Echo said, "We have to get a splint on this." Echo waved her off. "All right," Zoey said to the frozen Molech. "We've got a brief window of privacy before the audience joins back in. Here's what's going to happen. Those dumb people in the van are going to pile through that hole in the wall at any moment. At that point, you can surrender and apologize, or threaten them and get shot with arrows. But it's your call. Each of you. Stand down and live, or go out in a blaze of supervillain glory. I don't care either way. I'm going to pass out now." Zoey lay back, wondering who all had been watching this ordeal. Her mother? Caleb? Bella? Carla Dubois, the slut who had stolen her boyfriend in 8th grade? Stench Machine sauntered up, sniffed her mutilated leg, and curled up and went to sleep at her hip. As she slipped out of consciousness, Zoey heard the faint sound of shouted warnings, angry threats in reply, and primitive weapons impaling flesh. The last thing she heard was Black Scott saying, "Nah, man, I don't even know these assholes." 69. The cast on Zoey's leg was always gently vibrating. Something about using ultrasound to stimulate the growth of bone tissue, they'd said. It was barely noticeable unless you laid your hand right against the cast, but the effect was still maddening. The leg had needed 1 6-hour surgery, her rib another, but her face and teeth had needed 3 times as much work. Everything from the neck up was bandages or purple bruises, but at least her face wouldn't require 6 weeks of physical therapy, as she was told the leg would. She was doing her recuperating at the Casa de Zoey. They had turned one of the guest rooms into a hospital room, complete with adjustable bed, monitoring equipment, and a handsome around-the-clock nurse named Abel, which wasn't as sexy as it sounds, considering he had to help her to the toilet 6 times a day. Otherwise, Zoey was keeping to her New Year's Day tradition of watching 9 straight hours of basketball. It was the 3rd quarter of the first game of the triple-header, Zoey's Denver Nuggets on the road versus the Chicago Bulls. Andre was in a chair next to her, his feet propped up on her bed. Andre was eating a burger Carlton had made for him, one whose bun was somehow constructed of 2 flat lumps of fried macaroni and cheese. Zoey, fresh off of 2 rounds of oral surgery, was on an all-liquid diet and had somehow gained 3 pounds as a result. Right now the liquid was some Russian imported beer Andre had brought with him. Andre nodded to the wall to his left and said, "Ought to have that framed." He was referring to a 6-foot-wide stretch of white butcher paper that had been thumbtacked to the wall, covered in doodles and notes in Zoey's handwriting. Much of it was illegible, and one corner was obscured by a dried coffee stain, but in the middle was a clear to-do list under the scrawled heading Operation Z-Day. With virtually no explanation other than crude stick figure drawings next to each, the list went Taco Storm, Fake Alien Invasion, crossed out, Nuclear Bomb, Echo Hacks and or Seduces Something, To Face the Fire and Ice, Dawns, ? Cats, 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 Get Molech Back Here, Fart Ray, ? Will Works His Magic, like in The Rainmaster. It was her initial notes from the hours-long planning session the night before the solstice. Zoey sketching it out on her knees on the floor of the ballroom. She grunted, "Somebody should have taken the Sharpie away from me." "What are you talking about? Your part worked perfectly. It didn't fall apart until we got to Will's bit. Though all agree that my performance as Arthur Livingston's voice was perfection itself." "We could have gotten everyone killed. None of it played out the way I pictured. It was like we're trying to corral a rabid wolf that had wandered into a daycare. There was so much that could have gone wrong." Andre shrugged. That's par for the course. This was actually one of the smoothest operations we've ever had." They sat and watched basketball for a moment, while Zoey let that sink in. She took a drink and said, "When we started, Will asked me what Molech's weakness was, and that's all I could think of. He was a diva. It wasn't just that he couldn't stand to lose, he couldn't even appear to lose, not in front of a crowd. I figured a diva would rather die than be upstaged. Like I said, should be framed for posterity." Andre squinted at the screen. I don't understand. Why is it a foul to stand in the lane for 3 seconds? You really know nothing about basketball? I know the general idea. They get points for putting the ball through the hoop, right? Don't mess with me, Andre. I'm on painkillers. That's usually the perfect time to mess with somebody. Anyway, I'm more of a hockey man myself. I mean, the fouls don't make any sense. 2 dudes run into each other, and half the time they call it on the guy with the ball, and then the other half of the time they call it the other way. There's no rhyme or reason. Yeah, I admit that one is random. There was a knock at the door, and Wu let himself in, carrying a bouquet of get-well lilies in what looked like an antique vase. Zoey said, "Ooh, who are those from?" Wu said, "They are from me. The flowers are to get well. The vase is an apology for what I did to your car. I actually did not know it was so valuable. I picked the one that seemed most capable of speed. The explosion was, in retrospect, probably an excessive touch driven more by ego than practicality. I do succumb to a flair for the dramatic from time to time. I believe your people had rubbed off on me." Zoey said, "Well, it looked awesome. I'd say it was worth it. So, I never asked, did you jump out at the last second, or what?" No. That is actually not possible without putting yourself in a wheelchair. Early in the pursuit, we got stalled in traffic, and I ducked out of the vehicle and continued operating it remotely from a nearby cafe. That was the reason for the fiery finale. I wanted to delay the time it would take them to realize that the interior of the car contained only marshmallow. Contained what? Oh, well, I needed to put something in the passenger seat so it would appear you were with me, if we were captured on camera. I had no time to construct an accurate analog of your body, of course, so I found one of the marshmallow snowmen that had been stored in the garage and dressed it in your denim jacket." Zoey stared hard at Andre and said, "Do not say what you're thinking right now." You do not look like you're made of marshmallow, Zoey." "Exactly. You're employed another day." She examined Wu's gift and said, "That vase is beautiful." The room was full of flowers, and Zoey was trying to figure out the minimum amount of time that would be polite to let them stay before having them cleared out. She hated the smell. They reminded her of funerals. But the vase with Wu's bouquet was cool, ancient-looking turquoise with the threads of gold running through it. Wu said, "They call it kintsugi." "They call it kintsugi. The pot is shattered, then carefully reassembled with a resin mixed with gold. It symbolizes how we must incorporate our wounds into who we are, rather than try to merely repair and forget them." Wow, it's really pretty. And it looks like a pain in the ass to do, trying to remember where all the shards go. It wasn't easy. There was another knock, and Will Blackwater was at the door, carrying a small paper bag. It was like some announcement had gone out to have everyone converge in Zoey's room. Will said to Andre, "You know Zoey's having to live off protein shakes because of her jaw, right? And you're making her watch you eat a Mac burger in front of her?" "She said it was okay." "Right, so just the 4 divorces for you then." Carlton appeared behind Will at the door, apparently having rushed to the scene of a bunch of guests who all might potentially need something to eat or drink. The room was suddenly crowded, all these people looming over Zoey. You try to watch one basketball game and suddenly your room turns into Grand Central Station. Somebody's phone was ringing. Wu sensed her discomfort, set down the vase, and volunteered to go take up a post out in the hall. He assured Carlton that all was well, and guided him away. It was Andre's phone that had sounded, and Zoey caught that the floating display said Melinda. Andre stood. "I've, gotta take this. It's a customer." "It's my mom. I can see it on the display." "I don't want to talk about it. Go do whatever. You're fired from watching basketball anyway." He exited, shuffling past Will, leaving the two of them alone. Zoey let out a grunt of relief. "Too many people. I get that many people squeezing around me in a room and I feel like you can't breathe." "Ugh, exactly. I got a message from Echo saying her gift to me was that she wouldn't bother me for the duration of my recovery. It's the most thoughtful thing I've gotten so far." Will's bandages were visible under his hat, and Zoey could see where they'd had to shave that whole side of his head to operate. She asked, "When did you get out? Didn't they have to put a metal plate in your head?" "It's not as bad as it sounds." "Still, you had skull surgery and they let you out after a week?" "I let myself out. No point in lying there on painkillers when I can be out getting work done on painkillers. Speaking of which, are you supposed to be mixing yours with alcohol?" "Whatever, Dad." "If I was your dad, I'd be asking you to share. I heard back from the lawyer yesterday. The insurance company is going to fight you on the tower. They're saying this doesn't fall under the terrorism clause. They're calling it vandalism. Oh, and tomorrow the League of Badass are having their ceremony at the White House, where they're being honored for single-handedly saving the city." On the TV, the 7'5" center for the Denver Nuggets pulled up and took an improbable three-pointer from around half court, Nothing but net. Will groaned. Zoey said, "What, are you a Bulls fan?" "No, I have money on the Nuggets, but I cringe when McLaren hits a three because now he's going to take 5 more and miss them all." "Right. He's fooled himself into thinking he can make that shot." Zoey said, "Hot damn, have a seat. You're now my basketball watching partner." "I really can't. I have work I need to." "You work for me, and I'm assigning you the task of watching a bunch of New Year's basketball with me. I had Andre in that position, but he failed miserably and was demoted to having sex with my mom." Will paused long enough to demonstrate he was trying to think of an excuse, and then relented and took Andre's seat. Zoey said, "I figured we'd be under martial law by now, like the government would send in the army to make us all behave." "The government is more than happy to cover up the fact that their weapons systems are now useless in the face of arms you can buy off the street. There are about 4 different insurgencies in the world who'd love to know that." "I guess what I'm asking is, how long can tabula rasa be allowed to stay like this? The government isn't going to let things stay crazy pants here forever." "Well, there are thousands and thousands of wealthy political donors in this city telling them to keep their noses out. Tabula rasa has 120 billionaires at last count. But no, they won't let it stay lawless forever. A city full of thriving black markets means there's a whole lot of taxes that aren't being collected." "Oh, nice defense, Raj." He pouts when he doesn't get the ball. Zoey nodded toward Will's brown paper bag. "What's in the bag? Liquor?" "Oh, right." He dumped the contents of the bag into his hand. A green rubber mouse. "It's an old cat toy. My wife used to have a cat. It has catnip inside it. I don't have the cat anymore, but then I thought I remembered you had a cat of some kind." Zoey took it. The mouse smelled like new rubber. It was clearly just off the shelf. So Will had bought it, took it out of the package, put it in a different bag, and then claimed he had just found it so she wouldn't know he had made a special trip to buy her cat a toy. Zoey thought the best gift she could get Will was years of therapy. Zoey dropped the mouse on the bed near where Stench Machine was curled up. "Well, we'll know right away. If he bats it away with his paw, yeah, like that, he hates it. Oh, he likes the bag, though, and now he has his head stuck in it. It's a disaster. Anyway, that was very sweet of you, and it's the thought that counts. I can't even imagine a world where that's true." Will glanced at his watch. Zoey sighed. "Why do you have to pretend like you don't want to be here? You could have called to tell me about the insurance, or not even told me about it at all, because I clearly don't care. Instead, you made the trip all the way here. It's okay. You can just say, 'I wanted to check in and see how you were doing, Zoey, because I'm a human being and not an android.'" That created an awkward pause, which Will broke by asking, "So, how are you doing?" "I'm agitated because you're acting like sitting down and watching a basketball game with me is a chore on the level of cleaning out a sewer." Silence. They watched the game for a bit. McLaren chucked a 3-pointer that missed the rim entirely. Will said, "So what happens now? After you're all healed up, I mean." "I think I'm going to go on vacation." "And then?" "I don't know, Will." "You're not thinking about staying, are you? After everything that's happened?" "Didn't you want me to stay?" "Didn't you not?" "I don't know. I've grown to like having my toilet talk to me. You think more supervillains are going to attack? Even if not, I don't think you know what you're getting into. Just living this life. Up to now, you've spent your life trying to keep your little financial raft afloat, patching holes, bailing out water. But once you get into a nice boat with a motor and a bunch of passengers, there's this terrifying moment where you look at the ocean around you and say, okay, so now where am I actually going? It's a question most people can't answer. They're just not up to it. Wait, are you doing a reverse psychology thing on me? Maybe I just want you to think I am." Zoey tried to puzzle through that, then said, "I'll make you a little bet. If the home team wins the next game, I'll turn over complete control of the company to you and the suits. I'll leave town and I'll be out of your hair forever. And if they lose, I get to take a black magic marker and draw whatever facial hair I want onto your face, and you're not allowed to wash it off or cover it up or anything else for 30 days. You can take control of a billion-dollar empire, but you have to risk looking foolish for a single month. Oh, and at noon on the last day of that month, you have to shove the marker up your butt. Then, with the marker wedged between your butt cheeks, you have to go down to the train station and write, 'Zoey is our queen' on the floor. With your butt." Will shook his head and sighed. "You are Arthur Livingston's daughter. Oh, and just for that, you also have to permanently change your name to Fart Dawnman. This game is about over, isn't it?" "Yep. Then it's the Hawks versus the Celtics. You've got 6 more hours of basketball to watch, so settle in. This is your life now." "All right. Hand me a beer." "Get it yourself. They're in the mini fridge down there." here's something that I've been thinking about since I've been bedridden. I don't know if you picked up on it, but Molich really didn't seem all that smart to me. There were subtle clues to that effect, yes. So I got to thinking about what you said about magic tricks and how it's all misdirection. Is it possible that Molich was the misdirection for someone else? Somebody behind the scenes or whatever? Will, not showing any expression whatsoever, said, "Why, that would suggest, I don't know, that there's a bigger game being played here." Zoey said, "Well, now I have to stay. Oh, look, the cat's playing with his mouse." Will sat back with a beer and said, "Well, there you go. Mission accomplished." Whew, all right. I'm sorry it took so long, but that's the end. I'll read this little afterword real quick the author put in here, the actual guy who wrote this, not me. If you want to read more from the guy who wrote this, that's Jason Pargin, by the way, check out, I'm just going to read this. Check out my horror adventure novel, John Dies at the End. I also did a read-through for that. This book is full of spiders. Seriously, dude, don't touch it. And then there's, since this came out, there's also the whole, what the hell did I just read? I've done all the read-throughs for those books on my channel, so if you haven't checked them out already, and you like this author and this type of writing, then they should be right up your alley. At least one of those books has been made into a movie, available in whatever format movies are consumed in your era. I have no idea when you're reading this. Go stream it into your brain or whatever you people do now. If you want to keep up with news of upcoming titles and other noteworthy things in his life, assuming the internet still exists, he can be found at johndiesatttheend.com or on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Futuristic Violence and facebook.com/John Dies at the End the novel. Or you can read any of his humorous nonfiction essays at crack.com, where he is the executive editor as of the writing of this afterword, which is www.crack.com/members/David+Waln. A little bit more here, sorry. Special thanks to my wife, my friends, and my coworkers at crack.com, all of whom were neglected for months at a time while I painstakingly squeezed out the 140,000 words of this tale. I want to thank Mac for spending a year researching the uncontacted tribes of New Guinea, including a 6-month stretch living among them to learn their strange customs. Sorry all of that stuff got cut from the book. No one in this story is based on a real person, though some parts of Zoey's personality are based on a woman I used to work with who, like the protagonist, also indirectly caused several large buildings to be destroyed. His next novel will be the next novel will be the third volume in the John Dies at the End series, which has already come out, by the way, and in fact may already exist, again, depending on when you're reading this. After that, maybe I'll return to Zoey and the Suits in Tabula Rasa, or maybe we'll all die next week. I do not know the future. I'm just a man, David Wallen, a.k.a. Jason Pargin. So if anybody was curious, this was finished right at the tippy-tip top beginning, or he finished writing it in January of 2015. We're now toward the end of 2020, so it's been a minute. On a personal note, if anybody's still listening to this, thank you. I really appreciate it. I was overwhelmed by the views that I've gotten and the feedback I've received from my read-throughs of these books, considering the fact that they are, I repeat again, not my own. I want to stress that these are some of my favorite fucking books in the world, done by Jason Pargin. I have read the John Dies at the End series, which includes John Dies at the End. This book is full of spiders. Seriously, dude, don't open it. And what the hell did I just read? And now, I just finished reading Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. And before you ask, yes, I'm aware, the newest book in that series has come out, called, aptly titled, Zoey Punches the Future in the Dick. I own it. I have it on my shelf. I plan, as soon as I finish recording this, to pick up that book and record that one too. But yeah, I really greatly appreciate the support. It's been mostly positive. There's still the odd comment that not quite a fan of my style, but it's all right. Not everybody digs it. I get it. But if you've been listening this whole time and listening to the series and you really enjoy it, I'm glad that I can do that for you. To those that have said that I'm the voice of John to them, or that I portray these characters really well, I greatly appreciate it. I'm just having fun here with voices, reading the books that I enjoy, and I cannot wait to read the next one. So, as always, thank you so much for listening. I also do other content on my channel, movie reviews, gameplay videos, if that's any of your shtick. If you want to stick to the read-throughs, by all means, please do. I have no intention of stopping those anytime soon. Hopefully, I'll be able to get at least one out a week. I don't know if it'll be one chapter or what the structure will be, but I'm going to try to get regular uploads going on those as well. So, again, thank you. Please feel free to comment any other books you might want me to read. Subscribe and ring that bell only to be notified when I keep making content. And, of course, I love getting those sub counts up. But that's the bottom line is thank you so much for your support. Without you guys listening, almost all of this would be kind of futile, but now it's a little bit justified. So thank you so much for listening to my read-through of Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. Go get the book yourself, give it a read, go support the author. He makes great content, and stay tuned for my next read-through, which is going to be Zoey Punches the Future in the Dick. Love y'all, and goodbye, travelers.